Let's go.
All right. Welcome, everybody, on this Monday evening. Happy that you all came for such an important event as today. Welcome to the event on Dutch neo-colonialism in Africa. My name is Max de Ploeg. I am from Arales and Pakhuis de Zwijger. Pakhuis de Zwijger is the venue where you are now, and Arales is an organization that is focused on decolonization. And next to me is also another Max, Max Kofi,
Max
from
Coffee.
yes, from Equal Trade Alliance. Maybe
Yes.
you want to say what Equal Trade Alliance does?
Yeah. Equal Trade Alliance. Welcome everyone. That I should start by that. It was really I enjoy being here. It's Monday and you took your time to come. It's mean a lot to us. So thank you very much for that. I am Max Kofi, founder of Africa in Motion and Equal Trade Alliance. And the Equal Trade Alliance is an advocacy organization. We are actually a grassroots movement. We are setting up in both Africa and Europe to advocate for a new economic system concerning the trade of African raw materials.
Thank you, Max. And Max will also join us as a table guest through the different panels that we have in the program. And today is also organized by Equal Trade Alliance, Arales, and also supported by NINSE, the National Institute for Slavery and Commemoration, and also supported by Pakhuis de Zwijger. So also thanks a lot for the support. So the event is also organized in the context, well, um, both of course 150 years slavery and commemoration, but this day today we want to focus more on the continental perspective. What does it mean for the continent this year, and how can we look at neo-colonialism, or what's new? Maybe it's old, maybe it's already there. How can we understand how colonialism working today? And the program has two halves. The first half we will focus more on, let's say, trade and military neo-colonialism today. And in the second half, we will also look at how does that then influence migration towards the Netherlands and border racism. So how does it impact the people who are coming towards Europe afterwards, and what do they face in terms of challenges here? After each panel, there will be room for some questions from you as the audience. So during the panels, I will be mostly asking the questions, but during the Q&A, you can also ask your questions and a microphone will come towards you. Just so you're mindful of it, today is also being recorded and watched back on, will be able to watch back on YouTube. So just so you know, if you are deciding to ask questions, that you're also on the recording. Yeah, I think without further ado, we're going into the first part of the program, which is where we have two short introductory presentations. The reason is that we feel that the term neocolonialism is not a lot known or discussed in the Netherlands. Usually, colonialism is something framed as a history, right? Colonial history, but not so much into the present. So we first wanted to begin with two short presentation. I will give some context to present-day neocolonialism in a general sense, and Max Kofi will zoom in how that applies to the Netherlands, and specifically also the cacao industry as a case study and an example how that works. So if I can have the first presentation slide. I wanted to begin with a question to you, just curious in the audience. Oh, the clicker worked during the technique check, and then it always doesn't work. Next slide, please. So a question to you. Has economic inequality changed between rich and poor countries? And poor, I mean, aka colonized countries, from 1955 onwards to the present. Has inequality, A, if you think increased, raise your hands. All right, I think a good half, bit more than half thinks it is increased. Some of them followed the majority, I think, later. They were like, oh, if most people put their hands up. Who thinks B stayed the same? So it didn't change a lot. All right, who thinks it decreased? All right, one hand it decreased. And then part of the audience didn't know. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to show this slide. So inequality between states has, if you see the bubbles, has increased a lot actually. So before colonialism, it was 1-on-3 between richer and poorer countries. Around 1945, it was measured, it was 1-to-35. Then it was 1 to 80 in the early 2000s. Yes, the clicker is working. That's great. And the most recent numbers that I could find from 2014-15 from the UN says 1 on 110. So it is increasing and increasing multifold. So through that legacy, we can understand and see that actually inequality is growing. So something in terms of infrastructure, colonial infrastructure, is still doing its work how it was intentionally set up. And besides between countries that inequality is growing, we see this also between individuals. So wherever you go through the global south, you will see where Europeans are living. Usually they are in gated communities with swimming pools, these kind of things, the richer areas. So you see, for instance, a picture in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where you see a favela, a wall, and then every platform balcony has its own jacuzzi looking over the favela where they don't have good clean water, etc., etc. But if you zoom out, of course, Fortress Europe is this same gated community, right? Where this inequality is growing and growing. And how did we get here? Before I go into the present day neo-colonial structures, I can't do it justice within the 10 minutes that I have, but some general understanding of colonialism that you have to have is that colonialism is not an event, it is a structure, right? It is not like what the Vikings did. They loot something as an event and they go away and then loot again and then go away. No, they were there to stay, change the structures there, and implement their society over someone else's, right? So they came with science, they came with banking systems, they came with political systems, education, the military. So the whole web of infrastructure, of institutions that they started to implement, they were there to stay. So that's really important to understand why colonialism is still alive today, is because these institutions were exported on different places. Now, if you look how that looks like today, this is just a random African parliament from Uganda. And you will see the chairperson of the parliament is wearing a British peruke, like a blonde peruke. It looks quite ridiculous. Not offense to the person, but to the system that it's representing. They are speaking English, swear by the Bible that they will be loyal to the country, etc., etc. So you see that a lot of their laws are actually still British laws. So if you look, for instance, at the Gay Pride that we always celebrate, we're pretending that African countries are behind, right? And you see a list of countries who are still have not implemented gay marriage, this kind of things. But a lot of the laws there that are penalizing gay marriage are actually still British laws that have not yet been decolonized, right? So these kind of legacies you see there. When it comes to neocolonialism, you can see that a company like Shell can write an, let's say, English email to a government that is speaking English, and then according to English types of laws, get land, maybe where already people are living, destroy the environment, export the resources, and then if the people resist, the police get sent to it to protect the private property of Shell. So, for instance, the Ogoni 9 and the Shell cases that we have seen recently is a good example of where you can see this neo-colonial mechanism happening. And I really like this quote of Patrice Malidoma Somé, who's an indigenous person from Burkina Faso, from the Dragara tribe. And I think he said it really eloquently. He said, colonial tyranny did not leave Africa, it simply changed its face. The maintenance of colonial languages as the new country official ones, the literal copy of colonial political administration, and above all, the strict observance of Western manners are all elements that have combined to give birth to the Third World. The governments of these countries copy the style of the countries in Europe that colonized them, and the people in the official government position act, dress, eat, sleep, and live like Europeans. I suspect that every literate African who went to a colonial school such as mine carries, as I do, the marks of literacy on his body. These marks are not small scars. Literacy was literally beaten into us, and to avoid pain, we had to quickly master European languages, end quote. Just for context, for those who don't know, you can have a country with strangely European drawn borders, and within it, maybe 100 plus different languages spoken, right? But then the official language is English, for which he expresses his experience. Now, what happened at the Second World War? Some countries started to think, hey, if the right to self-determination applies to European people, they went to a European type of university, learning their Eurocentric curriculum, and they were like, hey, wait a minute. if right to self-determination applies to you, so it should apply to us. So, of course, after Europe was in wrecks after the Second World War, they saw their chance for decolonization. So you had, for instance, this Bandung conference organized in the 50s, where they tried to unite the global southern countries that tried to say, okay, how can we get out of these colonial traps? And they started organizing and organizing. And you see in the UN voting behavior, for instance, that this north-south divide in voting is always copycatted actually from this period on. So for instance, if you now Google who recognizes Palestine on the map, and you can see this coloring, you will see constantly this kind of north-south divide when it comes to reparations, recognitions to racism, seeing slavery as crimes against humanity. You will see this north-south divide in voting at the UN level. Now, did the European nations feel ashamed for colonialism and feel like, oh, we're so sorry, we give back the land and give reparations, etc.? No, they did not do this. There were different responses to these independence movements. Some of the most notorious responses were, of course, colonial wars. So you had, for instance, the Politionele Acties in Indonesia, but also the French-Algerian War, and so forth, to try to maintain their colonial power. Now, if it didn't work through violence, sorry, questions is for later, then another technique was to give countries sanctions, organize coups, meddling in elections through NGOs, threats of invasion, arms trade with dictators, and financial lendings. And you could see that reverse reparations were also happening. So for instance, Indonesia had to pay the Netherlands 4.5 billion at the time gulden for their independence, and they paid it till 2003. And the same went for slavery, right? The master enslavers got compensation, and every single thing was put in place to make the new system, the new transition, benefit the colonizers. And I like this quote from Malcolm X that says, if you stick a knife 9 inches into my back and pull out 3 inches, that is not progress. Even if you pull out all the way, that is not progress. Progress is healing the world, and America hasn't even begun to pull out the knife. I have 2 more minutes. So what I will say in this last 2 minutes to close is that the main mechanism, I've mentioned a few, is that when you see different independence leaders trying to reorganize their country away from this economic exploitation, which is called the resource curse. It's not a curse, it's just economic policy. You will see a mechanism happening that there's organized a lot of coups against these more socialist-oriented, or people want to reorient the economy. So there's a big list by William Blum, an historian, and you can see this is not a complete list, but a list of number of coups. And there to the right, you see military bases of the US, where you see constantly that if a leader tries to get a different reorientation, they get killed. So some of the names, and that you can Google on later, that you should know of examples of democratically elected leaders, because that's our marketing, from the West, are Mohamed Mossadegh from Iran, Allende from Chile, Patrice Lumumba from the Congo, and Sukarno from Indonesia, and they all got replaced after they were couped by horrendous dictators who ruled for decades, from Pinochet to Chile, Mobutu in the Congo, the Shah in Iran, and Suharto in Indonesia. What they all had in common is they killed a lot of their people, and using Western loan by Western bank and institutions to stay in power, to pay this police off and repress the people. And a lot of the countries still remain in debt today of these dictators and regimes that we've been trading with. And getting a loan from a Western bank doesn't mean you're free to do and run your economy. There's strings attached to it. So the neoliberal area, and I think the trade that Max Kofi will also talk about, are a result of neoliberal lendings. And then there's this concept, maybe that's my final words. The concept is odious debt. That's a term a lot used in the Global South that says these are debts that we shouldn't have had, right? For instance, also South Africa had debts from the apartheid regime, and they were paying with interest these debts to these banks, and then the banks determine their economic policy internally, which favors multinationals and so forth. So I will go to my last slide, which is a quote by Kwame Nkrumah, what then defines neo-colonialism. It's that the essence of neo-colonialism is that the state, which is subject to it in theory, is independent and has all the outward trappings of international sovereignty. In reality, its economic system and thus its political policy is directed from the outside. So you have flag independence, but your economy is still influenced from the outside. And he actually found neo-colonialism more mean than colonialism because it was more easy to identify your colonizer because you had the French, the British, and it's quite clear. And now, because you have this whole debt trap system, you first have to understand more of economics, banking, and so forth, so it's less transparent. So he found it actually a more mean system, and I think he was a visionary for naming that. And then I want to give the floor to you, Max, to also introduce how this then plays out and how the Dutch are also profiting from this neoliberal and colonial system today.
Applause for. Well, I can have.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You have some. Yes, 1, 2. I like to stand.
If we can have the hands-free microphone on. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
I can also talk without microphone. So, thank you very much for your introduction. And again, thank you for being here. Now you're going to listen to a new story. Something, hopefully, it will give you more hope for a better world. It works. I like to start first with this statement. Slavery, colonialism, neo-colonialism, it's all linked to economic interest. Welcome. So if we want to fight this system, it cannot be done by protest. It cannot be done by writing articles. It can only be done by addressing the system, the underlying system of neo-colonialism, what we call neo-colonialism today. So slavery was, the reason of slavery was having free workforce. Colonialism was to control the country and extract raw material for the industrial revolution. And the neo-colonialism today, it's because of keeping the system alive. The wealth that has been created from exploitation must stay alive. And the only way to do it is by using strategy. I always make a joke. I said the colonial plan was one of the best plans ever in this world because it's still working after centuries. These people have been really thinking very good about what to do. And when it comes to Africa, that's what I'm going to talk about today. So that is the content. We're talking about the Dutch neo-colonialism in Africa. And I will talk about the cocoa trade. Why? Because 86% of the production of cocoa beans from Ghana arrives here in Amsterdam, on the port of Amsterdam. 86%. We have done a research with the Wageningen University about that. So Amsterdam, the Netherlands, plays a big role in this story. Why don't we only have 15 minutes, man? That is...
we made it together.
Okay.
I was asking myself the same question.
Yeah. Okay. So the first strategy of the Netherlands is through trade to maintain neo-colonialism. The second one is trade evasion. It's also Amsterdam is playing a big role in that.
Tax evasion.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will tell you also about the consequences of poverty because we need to understand what's going on before talking about fighting against a system. It's very good to understand what's going on. I had a lecture at a university in Delft 2 months ago, and I was very surprised. A student told me that he didn't know that that agriculture was possible in Africa in 2023. So part of this colonialism is also keeping your own people in ignorance, because this system is functioning in your name, in your behalf. The thing is that you don't know the details, how it goes. And that is what we are doing as Africa in Motion. And Equal Trade Alliance is a new grassroots movement that we are setting up to create awareness about the system and to come with a concrete alternatives. So we are not protesting. I don't like protesting against anything. I want to solve problems. And we have a big problem in Africa. And if we don't solve the problem in Africa, it will reach out to Europe also. It's happening today already. So that will be the solution, equal trade certification, and how to get there. So you can understand it easily, we need to create alliances. We need to come together and fight this system in the benefit of all of us. The most cocoa beans from the world are produced in Africa, 70%. And it's not only the quantity, but also the quality. Before you enjoy delicious chocolate, this is the work that's happened in Africa. In this case, in Ghana. It's a very hard work, all manually. It involves old men, old women, young boys, but also children. So child labor is a very normal thing in this cocoa trade. You know this is how it works. In Africa, you have the production, and then it comes to, from Amsterdam, the big business start. To give you an idea, when we talk about chocolate, we're talking about a business at world level of $130 billion today. And in 2028, it will reach about 419 billion. So it's not a small thing. This is one raw material from Africa, from one African country. And we have thousands of these raw materials. This is how the money is divided. You see farmers and this is not only Africa, it's the whole world. So Asia, South America, and Africa, they're only getting 6% of this 130 billion today. And in 2028, they will get less, because this was, I think, in 2019, and in 2014, it was about 10%. So it's decreasing what farmers, what African countries are getting. You all know that farmers in cocoa producing countries get less than $1 a day. This is based on a research also. You can see how much people have to live from. 48 cents a day. With average of children, amount the family members, we're talking about 6 people. How can you live with this? And this doesn't happen only with cocoa in Africa, it's happened with all raw materials, diamond, gold, uranium, you name it. This is how Africa is kept poor. When we talk about energy transition today, TNO has made a research they have found out that Europe can only produce 14% of the raw material needed for the energy transition. Where are the 86% coming from? Again, Africa. But nobody's talking about that. This is without comment, you know. The government in Ghana get 1 million from this business, and the Netherlands, who makes only semi-finished products, make up about 20 billions every year, and it is going on since 65 years already. And not only for cocoa, again for diamond, from gold, from uranium, for coltan, for all raw materials coming from Africa, they are under the same regime. We are creating wealth for the whole world, and African people are living in extreme poverty. And what is the solution? We talk about development aid. We talk about sustainability programs. We talk about fair trade initiatives. So think about it. This system runs in your behalf. But I don't know if you had this information already. This is how it goes. How can you run a country with 100 million? In the Netherlands, you can maybe build 3 kilometers of highway with this money. How can you run a country and build it? So, this is funny. You see, in all the 2 minutes, yeah, I'm almost done. I think the story is already there. You understand why I'm getting emotional about this. So you see this old, she looks old, but it's because of the hard work in the cacao. And you see 3 women, I don't know in which city is this, Den Bosch. I asked them if I can make a picture. They say yes, but I had a plan. I wanted to use it for this. And they were all like, yeah, look. I said, wait, you'll get it. So these 3 women, they are not even owner of the shop, but they live from this money. This is the reality. And again, think about it. This happened with all raw materials from Africa. And then you have tax evasion. That's a bit complicated, but this is criminal. It's not allowed. And it's happened in Amsterdam, Zuidpas. We are holding in the Netherlands more than 20,000 subsidiary companies where money comes and then goes to a tax island like the Panama. And then the money goes back to the company. And they don't pay taxes, in this case, in Africa. This is complicated, but this is how it works. They do everything to bring the money back without paying taxes. I spoke about this. This is in Ghana 2 years ago, and this year they were against demonstration. Almost finished. But like I said, poverty affects also Europe. You know, Geert Wilders, all these people talking about migration. There is a migration crisis in Europe at this moment. But we are not coming to Europe because we like winter. We are not coming here because we like to be, I'm not in that fight against discrimination or things like that, but we are not looking for problems. We don't love problems. But we are living our countries, our families, because of this system. So people need to understand it. So this is our solution. We need a new certification. I take just half a minute for this. The solution for this problem, as Africa is providing the world with raw materials, we want a new economic model in which we don't talk anymore about the price of the raw material, but we share the revenue made from the finished products. Like the Netherlands is getting 20 billion from chocolate, we should send at least 5, 8, 9 billions to Ghana. Because without cocoa, you can never make chocolate. Maybe you can try something, but you cannot have this quality of chocolate. You can have machines. I was making a joke last time. I told someone, okay, eat your machines then. Eat your industry if you think that makes you powerful to dominate the world. You have university, fine. Make chocolate from books. Make mobile phones without coltan. It's not possible. So raw materials are not useless. And the way we are going today, it's still telling us you have this raw material, but it doesn't mean anything. And that is what we need to change. We need to have a new economic model where we start talking about sharing benefits and revenue from the final products. Thank you. I think I'm over the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Max. So I'm gonna check for the thank you for the Zoom if it's working, because we have also two international guests, and later you will be able to ask questions as well to us. But we'll have first two international speakers respond as well to the presentation, but also bring in their own perspectives on neo-colonialism, which are Jaforti Princeville Ghana, an award-winning sustainable agriculturalist, trainer, public speaker, and has 8 years of experience leading the Sustain Afrique team. Welcome. And the second speaker, he's coming from Cameroon, and Mika Shawala is the founder of Swahili Nation, One Africa Foundation, and creator of the YouTube channel Swahili Nation. And he's not in Tanzania, but from Tanzania, and he's the second Zoom speaker. So I think they are finding their way. And otherwise, if they're not here yet, then we maybe give room for Q&A in the audience. Oh, they're coming. Yes. Welcome, Mika. How are you?
Hi, everybody. I am doing fine.
Yes,
I'm
welcome.
sorry for inconvenience. I'm in South Africa right now for a business trip, and where I am right now, there's a huge group of people inside the house, and the only place I can be right now is here outside and try to communicate.
Oh. Well, thank you for taking the effort to be with us in that condition. But were you able to follow the previous presentations?
Yes, a little bit. I can't lie.
Yes.
But yeah.
Would you like to respond how that plays out, or how you respond to the presentations, how you can see it played out in your context around neocolonialism?
And you guys, first with your presentation, and then my brother Kofi there. I think you could have, you couldn't have done better with everything that you guys have shared. I've had a conversation with Kofi, multiple times, because we basically kind of like work together, and everything that he shared, I know those important details of everything that is happening, and I'm just glad that we're having this platform, because these things are not really being spoken, especially outside of Africa. And one of the issues that I've always had with this is that, the history and things that we talk about colonialism today, and things that are happening, for example, for instance, with cocoa and everything. I think in the side of Africa, we kind of know a lot about this history, but on the other side of, outside of the continent, when you go to the countries that they were really, they actually did that to Africa, starting from the colonialism. The new generation right now, they don't really know what really happened during colonialism, because these histories are not being taught in the schools. And because of that, even though we speak these things, we talk, but we don't really find the common ground, because they don't really know what we're talking about. Most of them, when you share these informations, they're kind of like wondering, and they're like, well, what really are you talking about, right? Because these informations are not being given from our schools. So one of the things that I was, when I was listening to your presentation, guys, one of the things that I was thinking is that I think it's important for, for the rest of the world to know the history, what has been done, to the continent. And I think from that moment, we'll have leaders who will be willing to actually take initiative, because most of people right now, they put blame on the old generation that our ancestors did this and that, this and that. It's not us, but well, we have a chance right now to change that, right? But we cannot really change anything if you don't know what we have done in the past, right? And so right now I'm here in South Africa. You guys know that Netherlands colonized here in South Africa. I have been getting emotional. You're just moving around the country. You know, I'm just waiting for my questions. I don't want to take a lot of time talk about that, but it's my first time to be here, and just seeing it, I've never seen such echoes of the colonial effects. So, yeah, that's what I would say for now.
Mm. Thank you for sharing, and we'll get back to you for more questions. And thank you also for sharing that how the lack of knowledge through education of what the history did to the African continent in terms of awareness on the continent itself is really important, I think, what you shared. I remember being part of the student protest. We wanted to decolonize the curriculum here, but also South Africa was protesting against their colonial curriculum and Eurocentric curriculum. So it made us connected at that time. I want to go to you, Jaforti. I don't know how long you've seen the program before and when you lost the connection, but maybe just to go in right to the question to you, how do you see neocolonialism played out in your context?
Well, I think it's something real. I think we are facing the effect. We're feeling it right now in Africa, in Cameroon, in Ghana, everywhere in Africa. And I think the biggest issue we've had so far it's been in terms of it's affected the youth. I think the biggest challenge with neocolonialism is how it's affected the youth. You can see the massive migration of young people who are traveling every day illegally, going through the Mediterranean Ocean. You know what it means for you to choose death over life in your country. You can tell you just how frustrated young people are, and this is the real effect of that. And when you take everything from people, they have nothing to lose. So they want to go back there, that same country you've made beautiful by taking their resources. So they want to go back there and be able to have a good life. And this has been the issue in Africa for a long time. So neocolonialism, it's really bad. Kwame Nkrumah describes this as economic neocolonialism. I think it's all about the control in terms of the economy. When you keep people poor, they are dependent on you and they can do whatever you want them to do. So the effect is really bad. And speaking from the perspective of a farmer, I'm an agricultural consultant. I think it's even worse for farmers because, trust me, smallholder farmers are suffering, children are suffering. They can't send their kids to school. So the effect is really bad. It's really, really bad.
Yeah, can you maybe speak or elaborate on that one with the farmers, but also food sovereignty in general? Because I know European countries, after the Second World War, there was a short period of hunger, for instance, in the Netherlands as well. And then they said, okay, never again, we're going to subsidize a lot of agriculture. We want food sovereignty. But can you speak to, because you work on agriculture as well, how economic policies influence the African food sovereignty and the position of the farmer? Can you speak on some of the mechanism?
Yeah. As we speak right now, we have 200 and something million Africans who are hungry, dying of starvation. As we speak, we have over a person dying every minute of hunger in Africa. Malnutrition is the talk of the day, and all of this. Now, the policy in place is simple. It's simple. Keep the people poor, make them beggars, send them aid, keep them dependent on us, and then we are going to come in and take whatever we want at the price we want. Now, how is it like? I mean, in detail. For instance, let's take the cocoa sector, which we know Netherlands is really big in terms of cocoa, buying cocoa in Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and the West. Let's take that for instance. Now we have the Netherlands. So what they do is they come to Africa. They have companies here that buy cocoa for them. So we have, like in Cameroon, we have Telka. So what they do is these farmers are not informed. They are not informed of the world prices. So what they do is they send these agents to farmers. They are middlemen. So when they send them to farmers, they tell you, okay, we are coming to buy. You don't have good goods. You don't have this. You don't have that. So since we are coming to buy at your community, in your community, we are going to buy at a very low price because, I mean, you don't have a choice. So now they buy this cocoa at the price where the farmers will always continue to be dependent on them. They will always continue to be dependent on them because as we speak, most cocoa farmers in Africa, I think we have about 6 million cocoa farmers as we speak. And 90% of these farmers live below the poverty line, which means no matter how much you sell your cocoa, you still continue to be poor. So when you are poor, you're hungry, what do? You have to sell to them. Now, this is the practical thing which is going on in the field because I want us to really understand this from the perspective of what is going on in the field. So before farmers sell their cocoa, they must have borrowed chemicals because imagine they sold at a price which is less than what they put in. So they didn't make profit the previous year. So what has happened is they are indebted. They are in debt. So what they do is they have to meet a middleman. These middlemen, they come. These middlemen now borrow money to them to buy pesticides, fertilizers, and all of these things. So when they buy and then they pump to the farm, they feed the farm, these middlemen now come in because these farmers are in debt. What they do is they come in now and tell you, okay, I gave you this, I gave you this, so you must sell your cocoa to me at this price. So the policy is clear. It's just we are going to keep you indebted, we are going to keep you poor, and then we come in and tell you whatever we want, and you don't have a choice than to sell to us at that price. So this is what is going on in the field. This is the policy that's in the field. And I say this clearly. This is caused by these foreign countries. It's a strategy in place. Let me explain why. Because we have been advocating online for a very long time for equal prices, fair trade. We have been advocating for very long. Now, what we realize is when we advocate, the more we advocate, these companies, they bring in ideas, they come in with initiatives like what Nestle is doing. They call it a sustainable whatever initiative. So what they do is they say they are going to compensate farmers that do cocoa farming in a sustainable manner. So there's a fee they will pay farmers. They say, okay, we are going to also give a small amount of money to the women. We are also going to try to sponsor some children to school. Now, this is not what the farmers need. Farmers should be able to pay the fees of their kids. They should be able to feed themselves. They are not beggars. So when they do this, the international community say, oh, well, these people are doing a lot. They are trying to help farmers. These initiatives are good. But it keeps the farmer poor and they continue to be beggars. Nothing changes. So this is what is going on.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. And I think then it relates to a lot what is happening in the large scale with the dependency on debts and then through the debts trying to negotiate better positions, right? We explained that before. But now you see that's on the individual level happening with the farmers as well, that they are indebted, made dependent, and then other prices get negotiated through that. So thank you for clarifying that it happens, between countries, but also between on the farmer level. Maybe Mika, I want to go to you as well because you have a petition, and what I liked a lot about your petition is that it has a Pan-African perspective. It doesn't look at the borders how it's shaped now, right? You know, all the scars that has been made by colonialism on the map, and you have things like having an own currency and also not wanting proxy wars to be fought on the African continent. Can you elaborate maybe on these points from the petition and what the vision is under your petition and how it's maybe an answer to neocolonialism?
Yeah, absolutely. So my point of view is I believe that colonialism never really ended in Africa, but I believe they just change the form or the way they operated. So, for instance, at the beginning, we had a white men, colonialists, actually in the country and trying to manage and everything to control. But after our forefathers fought for independence, we really got independence, but the system did not change. So everything that was done in the continent, well, when they were here, it is still been done right now while they're not here. To elaborate a little bit more on that is that right now, when you find one African country that is trying to break out of this shackle of colonialism, for instance, I can give you an example of Eritrea, I can give you an example of Zimbabwe. You'll see, even right now, in Uganda when they were trying to stand against these rights of gay rights and everything, you can see how the response from the Western countries, they'll put sanction on you, they'll try to limit your economy, they'll try to do everything they can to dismantle you and to teach you the lesson that you're not supposed to stand for yourself, you're not supposed to speak for yourself, you're not supposed to do anything because we are in the control. That goes on and on. Even in the case of the pandemic that we had recently, goes on with the war that was happening between Ukraine and Russia, that you are obligated to choose a side. That goes on and on in the U.S. and Africa summit that was happened in United States. African leaders were summoned to go to United States for that meeting. That if you're not going to show up, then there'll be consequences. That goes on with everything. Even right now, the war that is happening right now. So you find that Africa is still being led by someone who is somewhere outside, but they have kind of like their representative. And we have seen in the in so many different levels. Like you've seen a lot of our leaders who tried to stood up against that. What happened to them? Most of them were killed, and even today, there's still that battle that is happening. Even for us who are standing and talking about these things openly, we also, get threats sometimes because of, what we are doing to stand for the continent. That's why I'm saying that colonialism never really ended, but the system just changed. And so, us, the heart behind this petition when we were writing as a team, is that we're not just sit here and just blame, colonizers, victimizing ourselves. Because we know in Africa, you have two choices: either to speak and to die, or to stay quiet and embrace the old system, the colonialism system. So we have a bunch of politicians, which I can say, I don't really call them leaders in our continent, who do not dare to say anything about this because they know the consequences, what will happen to them. So they stay silent and just embrace the system. And as a result, we still have a divided continent. We still have a lot of, economic sanction that is happening in Africa, and we cannot break out of this. So we were thinking with the team that how can we really get out of this shock of colonialism that we are still having today? And I can give you an example of what is happening in the Western Africa. You realize that Western Africa was never free. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, those countries were still colonized by France all this time. I don't want to go to the numbers of uranium, how it's been used. Maybe I should give this an example. Just you can look at uranium that is, that is taken by France going to, taken by France from Niger going to France. It goes to this one industry, this production that they produce, what is nuclear, and then they're selling all around the world. And what happens is the money that is generated from the uranium resources that is coming from Niger is actually being brought back to Niger as a loan and aid. So basically, you give me loan or aid, something that is already mine, and I need to pay for that, right? And if I don't do that, there will be consequences. These countries have been colonized for all this time until this moment. Right now, we see a little bit of light because these countries are really trying to get out of this, shock of colonialism that is happening. And that is the most of status of African countries. That's what we are in, and that's what we are struggling. So when we were writing this, our hearts behind it was to address to African people that, all right, guys, we want to have a system that will work for us. And in order for us to have a system that will work for us, I think we need to be independent because Africa is rich and we have ability to actually change things upside down. Only if we exclude ourselves from these guys, we sanction ourselves. Africa must sanction ourselves, come all of us together and work on these things out, because Zimbabwe was sanctioned for a couple of years, but they learn how to survive on their own. Yes, they're not having a perfect life there, but they're learning how to survive on themselves. The same thing to Eritrea, almost 3 decades, but they are learning how to survive on themselves. Why? What's going to happen if all of us Africans sanction ourselves, coming together and make sure that we have African Union that until today is still receiving loans and aids from outside, but make sure that the money that is going to African Union is coming from the people, is coming from the African government, is being donated from African diaspora and Africans in the continent. We're looking at the budget of African Union. It's almost like $600 million a year, which is not that amount of money. If all of us Africans come together and be like, okay, let's do this on our own, then we'll have an organization that will be able to work for us and actually implement the vision of 2063. Instead of us waiting for 40 years from now, it can actually be done right now. The borders can be, the visa can be destroyed right now. We have seen what is happening in South Africa and Tanzania, South Africa and Kenya, South Africa right now in Ghana, is the free visa. What is happening in Kenya with Djibouti, they remove, visa. All these stages, all these initiatives, African Union can actually do today. We have even one Africa passport with the African Union, but it's never been distributed to the people. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that
yes, if you can wrap up, then we can go to the audience as well. But please finish. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was trying to say that the heart behind this petition is actually that. And if you guys, because we have very limited amount of time here to speak, if you guys would like to read that petition, the petition is available. I think they'll be able to share with you guys to see the details of what we wrote in this petition about the beautiful continent of Africa. That's what I was saying.
Yes, thank you. And the petition is called One Africa Right Now from Swahili Nation. I will put it on the program page so people can find it as well. Yeah. I have still a lot of questions, probably you as well, Max, but I want to first look to the audience if you have any questions for our panel speakers or Max or other Max.
Thank you. Thank you for such a nice and lively discussion. Okay. The one question that I really wanted to ask is, what is your opinion about the global super South, and how do they play a role into this neo-colonial structure? And sorry,
can you define global super South?
Yeah, like the new countries.
Like the BRIC countries, or
the new countries from the global South who are trying to use the same colonial structure but making them powerful, like India, China,
Russia.
Yeah, Russia.
And they want to involve Africa also a bit.
So the question is, I think, clear. You can feel free to respond. So the question was, how do you look at, within this current situation, the influence of new coming up countries? So you have the exploitation from Western countries, but also China's trading, etc. How you look at these developments as well?
Yeah. So if I can go that first, for me personally, I always emphasize on independent Africa that first and foremost, before us looking outside, we need to strengthening ourselves. We need to come together. We need to make sure that we are economic independent. For example, there's an organization right now called BRICS that a lot of Africans actually are excited, because a lot of Africa, they hate West, but they don't really hate Russia, and China and all these countries, because historically these countries never really did anything wrong to Africa. So a lot of Africans are lying with this side of the world right now. But me personally, I feel like this is not what Africa. Of course, Africa needs collaboration, needs all this stuff. But first and foremost, the first priority should be Africans coming together and African getting away from this this dependence of different kind of organization. Because we have an opportunity right now to create one Africa currents by ourselves. But when you look at the organization like BRICS, they have BRIC currents, right? Which a lot of people agree on that. But I feel like we need to focus on cleaning the house first before we start engaging with all these different ideas. Otherwise, there will be destruction to Africa's unity, and we are not going to focus on ourselves, but we'll focus on actually on the other side of the coin. Because everybody, I believe that everyone is just looking an opportunity, to take a portion of what that is in Africa.
Thank you.
For example, China and other countries have seen how Western have seen the mistake that Western have done to intervene with the Africa's policies. So right now they're trying to use a different kind of way. But I believe at the end, nothing will be is not for the benefits of Africa. Everybody's just looking to improve themselves. So it's very important for Africa to be independent first before, doing anything with anyone else. We can do that, but also we need to focus on us.
Thank you, Mika. I think that's a clear answer. And just to I know there's a lot of things that we can discuss and unfold, but for more people in the audience to ask questions, I'm going to ask everyone to answer as concise as possible. But I want to give the other speakers as well a chance to give a concise answer to the question that was raised, if you like. Otherwise, we go to the next question. I think
then very short maybe. The issue is the BRICS and all these new alliances, it's about African realizing how powerful Africa can be if we unite. If we unite, China, the United States, Europe, they will have to listen to us. So Africa is actually in the position to lead the world. And that's what we are missing now because we are divided. So that's what I want to add. The solution in Africa is a political solution. We need to become a political power. And that cannot happen with these nation states, small one, big one. We need to unite, create the United States of Africa with one president, one army, one currency. That's the solution. Otherwise, I was telling someone that if we don't do that, in the next 20, 50 years, African will end up like Indians have done in the United States. One day you will go to Africa, you will see on street in Africa, European, Asian, and African will be living again in the bush. So unifying Africa is strategically important. So that's why I like the petition. And I ask you all to sign for it because it's important to take this step. If Africa unite, we are friends with Europe. We can work together. Don't be afraid like we want to have a power to dominate. In our culture, in the Ubuntu culture, we don't have this mindset of dominating others. So please understand that and sign the petition from my brother.
Chiforti?
Yeah, I think what Russia is using is soft power. When I was in Egypt, we had diplomats who came from the EU and they spoke about this. So it's soft power. You know, you come and you look all sweet, all nice, and then you steal. And I mean, so this is what is going on. In Cameroon, I like speaking from a practical perspective. We have Chinese companies here, and trust me, they are not treating us well. So I must tell you, I sometimes I might even prefer the Americans because when they come to your country, China, they take everything, and they are so rude, they are so disrespectful. And then in an economy in Africa with so much corruption, you imagine a Chinese man locking you up for nothing. If you disobey him, you are in trouble. They'll even flog you with a stick or something. These are things that are happening. I'm not saying all companies, Chinese companies are like this, but I'm just saying that these are the realities we are facing already. So, Max said, and Mickey, I think it's important that we unite. It's important that we come together. And this is the perfect opportunity. Imagine two giants are fighting. This is the time for Africa to rise. Honestly, what is going on in Mali, in all these countries, Burkina Faso, would have never happened if these giants were not fighting. Trust me, all these leaders would have been killed or something would have happened to them. Let's look at Gaddafi. Let's look at Sankara. Let's look at all these great leaders. They were killed because they wanted Africa to unite. But now, these other leaders in Mali, in Burkina, they are alive because these two giants are fighting. Because there is somebody who says, no, you're not going to kill them because I also have an interest. But this is a perfect opportunity. If Africa can take this, I think we'll be able to unite, we'll be able to stand together, stand strong, and really build the continent.
Thank you. We have room for one more question, so I'm going to ask if you really want to ask it, keep your hand raised, and I'm going to look around. There is 3. I have to choose one. Kel, did you see?
3 questions then.
Yes, so we did one on the left, we do one on the right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, you hold it, okay. No, thank you for sharing your stories. Max, I'm wondering, you said political is the solution. How can we help with that from a European perspective? I remember you said in the beginning, just protesting or writing articles doesn't help. Thank you.
That's a good question. And maybe to the whole panel as a closing question, I like this question, like a point of action. What can we do here to fight neo-colonialism?
We need solidarity. Desmond Tutu, you know him. He has an interview in Collège Tours. And he said the reason why apartheid stopped in South Africa was not because of the army resistance. the resistance with weapons, but because Europeans started to boycott product from South Africa. So what we need is you to understand that you have power. You have political power, you have economical power. So if we work together, we can change the system very fast. That's the reason why I am fighting in Europe, because most of these leaders that have been killed were in Africa, and they were only mobilizing African people. And now I am mobilizing European people. Our ambition is like next year, end of next year, to have teams in all 27 countries of the European Union, mobilizing students, mobilizing civil societies organization, mobilizing politicians to create this big alliance. Because this system is so strong that it can only be defeated if we are stronger than that. And the best way, what we can do is to come together and create this alliance. This is what I'm expecting from this side.
Thank you. Over to you, Mika and Jaforti.
Oh yeah, appreciate that. I would just love to add to emphasize on what I shared earlier, education. For me, I feel an education not only in Africa, but also the education of how and what your forefathers did to Africa, because those syllabus, they're not being taught in Europe or in America. They don't really know, and I can't blame, but ignorance, the good thing about ignorance is that it has a cure, and the cure is knowledge. Us really understanding, and if you guys get some chance to come to Africa, come and understand the concept of how colonialism did to Africa. I think this awareness, it can actually create some sort of responsibility in your hearts. I studied in Korea. I lived there for 9 years. I've seen how Koreans have been taught about Korean history, what Japanese did to Korea, what Mongolians did to them, what Chinese did to them. And these guys, you can see right now, they're competing right there with China, with Japan. They actually, in so many ways, they're above Japan. But that's because they really understand what happened to their country, and they're ready to actually, take initiative and do it. Right. So I really believe in the education. I think if we start with that, then it will bring that knowledge of understanding and knowing that, okay, we all have a part to play, just like Brother Max said, both of us to come together and to make sure that we end this an ecosystem that is continue to kill a lot of people in the continent. And you have NGOs, and you have all these different organizations coming to actually try to fix these issues, but NGOs cannot really fix anything, unless we understand this historical context of what really happened and trying to make change.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And also, I think everyone emphasizes their own inequality and strength instead of this dependency on NGOs. I think that's a very important point that has been raised several times as well. Thank you for sharing. You have the last word.
Yeah, I think to me it's about changing the mindset of Africans and the mindset of particularly the young people. I don't think the change is going to come in this generation. I think the change is going to come with the young people that are coming up. There's a lot of awareness, but I think we must increase the awareness to let young people from 5-year-old to understand the culture, like Mika said, the culture, the tradition, the history of Africa, to understand that because you're black, you're not the devil, and to understand that Jesus was not a white man, and all of this, because honestly, it comes from the religion. It comes from us seeing. Can you imagine you meet a white person and children are running like it's Jesus? This is just how much we've been brainwashed to think that we are inferior as black people and that we can't really achieve anything. Any new discovery, we say, oh, white man is too intelligent. Like, I don't understand. Even when the black man invents something, it's always thought to be invented by a white person. And I think it's really from the mind. We need to change this perception. And it comes from what? Creating more content, social media. It comes from being able to have our own news outlet, be able to change the narrative.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Please give a warm applause for our first panel. And yeah, thank you also for coming through Zoom. That was Mika Shavala and Jevorti Princewell Ghana. Thank you both for joining in. So to have a small break because we have been talking a lot, we also brought some music. So I don't know if MCN is in the house. Yes. All right. He's an underground rapper from Zimbabwe, and he will share with us his music. I don't know if I can do something for you. We have a hands-free microphone. Right, walking to the technique. They're whispering, they're making it a surprise.
Okay.
Just let me know. If it's not ready, we can also do it at in the ending.
Is it ready? Hey, man.
Hello. Yes. A cappella.
Yeah.
Cool. Give it up for MCN.
Hey guys, hello. Mic check, 1 2 1 2, yeah. Ik ben MCN, yeah, from Zimbabwe, yeah. I just do like a cappella, yeah. Okay, yo. Yo, say no to neo-colonialism. Stay up in the game every time. Yo, do what you gotta do every time. Stay focused all the time. Make your thing, do your thing, and be yourself. Stay cool at the time. Yo, I'm from Africa, yeah, we all unite together. Where you come from, do your thing. Stay focused up, never give up on your dreams. Stay cool every time. You gonna live your life all the time. Be yourself and be yourself. Say no to colonialism. Yo, we stay up from Africa. All nations unite, yeah. One nation, one African country. Everything up, United States of Africa. Woo! Yo, unite, Africa. Woo! Thank you.
Thank you. Where can we find you? Like on Instagram, how can we follow, support you?
MCM Music, yeah. Instagram, yeah.
MCM Music, Instagram. If you go to the program page, you can find the Instagram link. Thank you, MCN. Give it up for MCN. All right. So, on to our next panel and subject. So we have been talking around a lot, basically how the resources get into Europe, right? The second panel will look more into the relation of neo-colonialism and migration, because somehow all the resources are welcome, but the people who are coming here are not. And to discuss these relationships and what kind of policies are happening, we have this next panel, so please give it up for them. Which is Khalid, Francesca, and Fairuz. Please give it up for them. And Max, you can also take a seat. So to introduce them while they're taking a seat, Khalid Joan is an activist in solidarity with Sudan and former spokesperson of the We Are Here movement. They've been known to put on the agenda and make visible, like, we are here, the people who are undocumented and living in Amsterdam and across the country. Thank you, Khalid, for being here. Give a warm applause for Khalid.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. And then we have Francesca Barberi. She's doing a master's in international affairs at the Hertie Berlin, and also looked at the relation between migration and economic policies in the cacao sector. Please give it up for Francesca. And we have Fairuz Selbaks, co-founder of PetLink, activist, international human rights, law jurist, researcher, and trainer. Please give it up for Fairuz. So a lot have been said, but maybe just as the previous speakers as well, is there any reaction that you want to give to the previous panel or things that have been said? But if you answer that, also maybe relate how you view that what has been said before relates to migration according to you. And
Can I start?
yes, you're free to start.
So I do want to set the record straight on one thing. We've heard a few times the sentence, we gained our independence, we were given independence, but actually that's not true. We were always independent. We were independent nations, we were independent people, and we regained our independence. And I think that's a crucial difference because something was taken away from us and we took back what was always ours. So I urge everyone to not talk from the perspective of, oh, we got our independence in 1965 or they gave us our independence. No, they actively came to our countries, took our independence away, they enslaved us, they colonized us, and we took it back. Regarding the topic of neocolonialism, I have a bit of an issue with the neo. Neo is Latin for new. There's, for me, nothing new about it. It's true what Max said in the beginning. Slavery and colonialism go hand in hand. And yes, it's true it was an economic structure to enrich oneself, but there's nothing neo about it. What happened 200-300 years ago is still happening today, right? If we think about the United Nations, a lot of people think about human rights. What I think about is the United Nations was created in San Francisco in 1945. If you think about how the world looked like in 1945, it was largely colonized, if not all. It was a small selective group of countries who created the UN, and it expanded over time, but it was never created to include the African countries or certain countries of the global south. That was not their intention. It was not their intention for the human rights treaties to include us people, right? So there is nothing neo about it. Same goes for institutions like the World Bank, IMF, even the European Union. And like you already said, they like our resources, but they don't like our people. And I think the war in Ukraine is a very good example of that, because what we saw is that when you're white, you get everything. When you're black, you don't get anything. I've been to those places. I traveled to Ukraine, to the bordering countries, to help people of African descent. And what you saw is that all of a sudden, we didn't need conferences. We didn't need so many debates. We could adopt laws within a week, not even, to grant people asylum, money, housing, schooling, you name it. But when it came to people of African descent, we took the humanity out of them. We called them third country nationals. Third country nationals. You're not a number. You're not a person. You're not someone who's traumatized, who fled away from something, right? You are a third country national. You're not number one. You are not number two. You are not number three. And that is still going on today.
And maybe to specify for so that everyone can follow the third country national you're referring to now are specifically people from the African continent who were in the Ukraine, and then the selection happening over there with people fleeing towards.
Yes and no.
Yes and no? Yeah, please explain. Yeah.
My personal work is only focusing on people of African descent, nothing more, nothing less. That's a deliberate choice that we made as an organization that I proudly stand for. The entire concept of third country nationals is, I would say, in a social sense, if you have a skin color that's not white. What we saw is that third country nationals also entail people from India, indeed African people. When the war in Ukraine started, what we saw, especially in the university areas which are more towards the Russian border, is that they would queue people up based on their skin color. So if you were, let's say, someone from Morocco and very light-skinned, you would place at front of the line. And if you're black, you would place at the end of the line. And that would determine the way how you would be evacuated, if at all. And at a certain point, they were like, you know, we don't want those people over here. We don't want them. So let's call them not first-class citizens, not second-class citizens. Let's call them third country nationals. First country nationals generally means like you're from the country. Like I have a Dutch passport, so I'm officially a Dutch citizen. Second country national means that you have a passport from a European Union country, so you're a citizen of the European Union. Third country national generally means everything and anything outside of that, but in practice, it is something completely different. It's just a racist concept that takes the humanity out of them.
Thank you for specifying and clarifying that. And I think that maybe builds also a bridge to you, Khalid, because there was this groups, right? The Ukraine war happened and then suddenly people were welcome. But then if you looked closer, and that wasn't really covered in the news, there was a distinction by which people were coming in, which Fairuz was explaining. But you were part of the We Are Here movement also, which was about people who were living here already, sometimes for decades. Can you elaborate more about this We Are Here movement? What was the context and what people have been experiencing being here?
Okay, good. First, let me say it like that. Let me start it like this. I remember a couple of years ago, I think almost 10 years ago, we have started research here about African refugees here in Europe, for example. Excuse me. Then we find out like only France, for example, benefit 500 million a year. Every year 500 million, but we invest nothing in Europe, in Africa. And like 2 months ago, I was have a chance to travel to France again to do kind of a report about the migration for CNN. And I realized like 10 years ago we have did research here about it, but then something now we're able to see it clearly. For example, a lot of undocumented migrants, Africans, young people, that have been forced to cross the Mediterranean Ocean, which become kind of symmetry to a lot of them. What makes me really think, it's not about what's all the European politicians thinks about it, but it's about also what do we need to change? Are we able to change something? Let's first start to distinguish what means the colonialism. What does that mean? For example, we try to distinguish it through the lines or to make some lines. It's a kind of force control. That's the first thing to think about it. And the second thing, divide to rule. This is something which is happening to be practiced a lot here. Even in We Are Here, for example, we witness some people come to support, but they're not there for supporting you. They're there to create a gap between you and your other mates, for example, in the organization itself.
Can you give an example of this divide and rule that is playing out? If I make like a tangible example?
Yes, for example, where is We Are Here now, if you think about it, when we were a very powerful movement fighting for human rights against racism, for example, and sharing information, exchange information with the students, creating events, panel discussions with the politicians. The out of it, we hear that, for example, We Are Here name become bad name. I don't understand, I don't know how name can be bad, but person can be bad. For example, your name is John, I call you John. John, it's your name. But how John can be bad, for example? John is not object. So they start like that, We Are Here name become bad, Yeah. And then that is one of the reasons, like We Are Here now. It's not about really finished, but just like also time change, for example, like what we witnessed in this since 2018, for example, until now. In Africa, there is a lot of military coup, for example. We witness also the young African generations, the kind of really fed up from African European relationship, for example. And the Russian try to study the gap in between to find a place to be there.
Yeah. No, I think this divide and rule also happens, let's say, within Dutch society. I remember what you say, that We Are Here got a bad name, was at the time you had a lot of direct actions, like you were squatting for housing, things like that, and it got portrayed in a certain way.
Yes, because, because that was recently, let me first give you a background of We Are Here. We Are Here of group of undocumented migrants, self-organized since 2011, 2012. That was because of the gap which was created in the Dutch asylum policies by the by the some political leaders. Let me give you some name, for example, Rita Verdonk and the Tevens, Meneer Tevens, and that was to discourage others not to come to demand asylum in this country. That was the reason. So we find that really harsh, and we will not accept to deal with it. So we have to create visibility. We have to come together to be able to share our message, for example. And a lot of people here, there was also there, him also, he was there all the time. Abdurazak and also. So this was the reason. But then, for example, you will not accept to be an example, because you believe that you're born free and you should live free, and you have to do everything what you like to do freely. Even though we have no chance to be stayed in our country there, we forced to give up our country to seek or to search safety somewhere else. But let's also come back to the reason, for example, what forced young African generations to give up the country. Look, when you give up your country for reason, sometimes it's okay. But sometimes when you give your country with no any perspective of coming back, you have to think about one thing which is you have never experienced it before. For example, when the past become less important than the future. You mean your past is your history, is the place where you were born, where you were raised. You know, the food, the taste, the smile. You know, the people, your friends. You have to give up this all just in one day. You know, like kind of really challenge decision that you have to take. And when you come also, you have to face all these
barriers, the ocean.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you study it, you find out, like, for example, 80% of the African migrants today, only one country was the reason, is France. But the European Union is weak to face France to say, I wish if Geert Wilders, for example, then to bombard the refugees, bombard the European Union to change their policy to Africa, for example.
Yeah, because they are coming because of the external policies. That's what you're saying.
Yes. And I used to mention in a lot of different places, is what we need in Africa. We need exercise books. We need book and pencils. We need to create classrooms and give the kids opportunity to predict their own future. That is what we need in Africa. But we do not need jet. We do not need tanks. We do not need weapons to fight against each other. And what is really there also, suddenly now what I have also learned from my country, Sudan, for example. Now there's a lot of going on in Sudan there. You know, something really shameful, you know, like some of the European countries, you know, just like openly dealing there with some dictatorships, and they're bombarding the refugees here. Mm-hmm. So it makes me think about, you know, about the slave trade. The slave trade was about if you allow the boat from Africa to Europe or to America, if you brought them all, you will be paid. If you kill them all, you'll be paid.
Mm.
You know?
And for people who don't know, this is also if you Google something around like externalization of borders and who were trading weapons with, were like trying to trade with dictators and things like this to keep the borders. Because people think that the European border starts in Europe, but nowadays it's already into the African
European border is not start Europe. European border start in Sudan, for example, by the SRF, Rapid Force. I don't know the call them. Yes. And these people, there was militant creating by the Omar al-Bashir, the former president of Sudan, or also dictatorship. And that was, for example, he went to because it was a little bit difficult for him to split the military, because some of the hierarchy in the military also against his policies. He has to create something to balance. He created this militant. The European Union at that time they have plan also on supporting the border security. So there was a lot of refugees come, for example, from the Horn of Africa. Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, for example, crossing the Sudan to Libya, and from Libya to Italy. They want to close that border, so they start to finance the militant in Sudan, RSF. And you know, it's very complicated. What's happening now? All the finance and the equipment and the ammunition that they have received from the European Union now they use them against Sudanese civilians, while the European Union is side look. And we called them, we announced it in so many different locations. We said, guys, now the situation is not like before. The situation is really dramatically change. And there's also opportunistic, they're using the gap between our relationship here, I mean, Russia. Some of the African people really, they did not happy to have a contact with Russia, but they've been forced. As some, like also the same, just we have been forced to come from a country, for example, to seek or to demand asylum somewhere else. Also have been also forced of the way that, from the way that have been treated you, to choose another friend, which is also, he cannot be your friend because he has also his own agenda. But to you that time, you will be blind, you will not see, you will think that is the better, but in the fact, that is not the better. The better is how we can fix the relationship that we have built. I do not believe in this all generations context, all generation politicians. This is only times go, because most of them, since I have born, I saw some of them there in the parliament. Up to today, they would never want to leave, and they will not leave until to die. I think this is our worst problem today around the world, not only in Africa, even in Europe here. Here in Holland, here we have also now. I think I don't know how long we have no government now.
I mean, every 2 years it falls, and then.
Okay, then,
but it was been steady,
yes,
Margaret, and
no,
we'll see what happens next.
Then you know, then what is going on? Like Route 3, Route 4, Route 5, what is going on? There is no new generation ever that took place of these people. That is what we need. By our gathering here today, I think it's very great opportunity. Each one of us here, when you leave from here, you go to back your home with your homework. You know, this is really can be homework. And to change these things, it some takes time. Some it happens, but when we push, force, we will achieve it. We are here. When we start, was 20 people. I don't know. After a couple of years, become like 450 people. The same cases have been denied before.
Khalid, can you also move to the wrap up so I can also? But yeah. do finish. But
okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
You know, the same cases have been rejected before have been accepted. At the end, why? Because we have really forced and we join our effort together in order to achieve something, and that's happened. And now I would like to send you the same message, please. You know, just take it as a homework, share it with your friends. What do we need? I believe most of the young generation today, they are really happy to travel to live somewhere else, and we can create the safety of that place from here. Before we go there, everything will be okay.
Thank you for sharing, and also sharing the perspective of the borders getting outside of Europe and our homework here. Francesca, maybe you want to share also what your study results were. We started the evening with the cacao industry, and a lot coming in from Ghana, Ivory Coast. Maybe you can share what you found out and the link to migration.
So my research was kind of linking these two topics. Unfortunately, I am yet to carry out most of it, so I'll be collecting primary data and conducting interviews throughout the next coming weeks, so I can only speak with the preliminary literature reviews and the preliminary findings I have. But yeah, so the what I'm looking at exactly is how this neo-colonial relationship and the unequal trade affects living conditions and ultimately drives migration. And I'm sure we've all seen the kind of rise of right-wing governments across Europe and this kind of anti-migrant rhetoric. But as everyone has said, there's really a lack of motivation to deal with the root causes or help to deal with the root causes. So, and there's quite a big research gap with regards to this link, in the sense that a lot of migration or like fair trade theories, a lot of the literature is from the 1990s or the 2000s. So we definitely need a bit of a refresher. And if we want to talk about the Ghanaian cocoa industry, the EU obviously is by far the most important for Ghanaian exports. So, you know, as everybody has said, we have a part to play in this, and this also means that the future demand for cocoa is predicted to be high. But it's kind of shifting to more conscious consumers. So I think consumers are starting to care a little more about sustainability and all of these things, which means that producers and the big Western chocolate companies can come to benefit from selling premiums or certifications as such. Although Ghana still has a very limited production possibility, despite them trying to increase domestic consumption. And one of the big problems is that it's a highly concentrated market. So this is really has negative consequences for the farmers, as Max was saying before. I think only 4% was a statistic I read recently. 4% of farmers, farmers gain 4% of the profits of a chocolate bar, essentially, which is, you can imagine, nothing. And this is because like roughly 10 companies own 43% of global sales. And because of how big the industry is and all of these factors, it's there's a lack of alternative livelihoods, and the working conditions are obviously terrible. It undermines the sustainability, as Max was saying, child labor. Thousands, millions of people's lives depend on this, but it's a very, people are harmed, essentially. And it's a big push factor for migration, as I found from the literature. We'll see if the interviews agree.
And the push, how is it reasoned? How is this leading to the push?
It's a pretty simple, so poor living conditions, yeah, so if there's no, I can't remember who was saying it, but if you're pushed to, you have nothing left, then people will get on these boats and risk their lives to come to Europe for a better life. And in Europe, people keep on saying we don't want them, but we don't want to find the solution. So in this push factor, in the sense that economic troubles at home are often a very significant driver of migration, which, it's fairly obvious, yeah.
Clear, thank you for sharing. And maybe, Kjeld, I want to show one statistic. There was the one that I didn't get to in my presentation, where you see a huge pile of cash on one end and a smaller pile of cash on the other one. And it's, yes, great. I thought I had to explain more, but it's this one. I didn't get to explain it, but it was talked about a lot around economic independence and self-reliance instead of getting aid and being dependent. And there was a study trying to make this visually visible. So you have 3 factors in which the global southern countries are developing Europe. And that is one, tax avoidance. So let's say you have a British mine or something, or land that is being sold and privatized, and then they don't even pay taxes for the resources that they steal in the country itself. So it goes back with the whole construction that Max showed. So tax avoidance is one. Debt interest rate. So then you lend money, but you make profit over what you loan. You lend €5, and then you get back €10 in the end because of interest rate. And then there's cheap labor, right? What Max said, people went from 0 per hour to 180 cents, what you said, on average in the cacao industry. So cheap labor. If you take these factors, then around 2 trillion is stolen every year from the global south. And then in development aid comes back 130 billion. So, and this is sort of the narrative we need to break, right? The Giro 555 culture, I sometimes say, like, we need to help others, but we're stealing away all the, what is called the resource theft. So I just want to show this graph to make visible the looting of the continent.
But there are 2 very important ones missing on the list.
Undoubtedly.
The first one is colonial taxes. Today there are 14 African countries who are required to pay with the French franc, which is absurd because in France they pay with the euro. And without signing this agreement, they couldn't regain their independence. And then there is a second one, which is not only related to France, but also to Spain, to Portugal. The Netherlands had some part in it. And it's some kind of investment agreement. And it basically entails that, let's say you're in a given African country and you delve gold. And you think, oh, I want to sell that gold in the market to have some money. The country that colonized you, so let's say this happens in Madagascar, the Madagascar company who does the gold needs to mandatory talk to the Portuguese government, who is not on the continent, and offer them the gold and say, look, we've delved 100 kilos of gold and we want to sell it. If Portugal says we want to buy it, they buy it. They determine the rate. If Portugal at that point says we don't want to buy it, but at the same time we don't allow you to bring it to the market for others to buy it, they're not allowed to sell it. So I think those two also need to be mentioned because they're contributing heavily.
No, I think this is only 3 factors. So, I mean, if there's students here or people like, we need to, you know, map all the different mechanics. And it sounds like Jan Pietersen Koen is still alive, like trying to monopolize a market. It sounds just like what they were fighting for at the time. Like, we decide who you sell to and why. So thank you for sharing and adding that this is a far from complete picture as well. I see the audience is getting itchy, so I would like to actually then open it up to the audience. Maybe Kjeld can walk around. There was one in the front.
It's okay. I'm used to it. Maybe to Francesca or Max Coffee. 2 ministers of foreign affairs of development cooperation. I asked, why don't you be fair for the income of the people in Ghana to have equal import taxes for chocolate and for cacao? Yeah. The lady Kaag is now happily out. Ploemen was already earlier out, but Ploemen had the worst part of her answer. She says, but Ghana doesn't have, and the other countries doesn't have chocolate factories. So it was like a terrible show of, I don't want to understand. So I think import taxes should be maybe number 6 on this list. What would be your first demand to the next Minister of Development Cooperation to be fair in this matter?
I think maybe Max for you, yeah.
That is what we are working on at this moment. So we are forming a coalition of Dutch NGOs, civil societies organizations like VNO and CV, to bring them together and advocate for a new economic system, because I stay there. Doing something with taxes is the same like working on the prices of the raw material. If we want to change, we need a systemic change. We need to share the big money. When that will happen, then we can start talking about, okay, who is paying which kind of taxes, who is paying what. One example, not related to Ghana, the government of Kenya has just signed a new agreement with the European Union. They call it free trade agreement. But in this free trade agreement, Kenya is exporting raw materials like tea, like oil, and all these raw materials to the European Union without taxes. So they think it's free. But in exchange, Europe is inviting the African market with finished products, and they don't pay any taxes. So which means just by this signing this agreement, the government of Kenya is already losing billions. So the tax system should be something incorporated in the whole system, and that's where we are working on now. First things first, we are losing too much money. That is what we want to talk about. You have seen the difference. Ghana get 100 millions, the Netherlands get 20 billions. You can have taxes, you can increase the price of the raw material, but Ghana will never reach 1 billion. And so this is the issue we are working on. This is a very good question, but we have a meeting on Thursday about this.
And maybe also good for people to know these loans, what I said, there's condition attached to loans, and a lot of these loans orient towards export everything basically. So one of the thing is lower tax tariffs for your export of raw materials. So if you're indebted, let's say you get the democratically elected, but you have a legacy of debt, and the debt has these rules. Now you're not allowed to change this and that policy.
Exactly.
So lowering minimum wage, we're talking about this wage being too low, is also part of that policy. So you have like, it's called structural adjustment programs. There's like 38 things going on, and a good book on it, and an economics who looked at it is from Haju Cheng. He's a Cambridge economics. It's called Kicking Away the Ladder, because the West climbed a certain economic ladder, and then they kicked it away for others to not follow the same path, because the policies that they are dictating now through these loans for other countries to follow, that's not a single country followed that policy to get their own economic growth. So it's a lie, but people still learn it at universities as truth. So I can really recommend that book also to.
But you know, just let me add, I think this is the most thing, you know, like one of the thing which is in the future is going to decide how the European-African relationship it can be, but with this new generation, not with old generation.
Yeah.
You know, really there is kind of you know, things going on there. So like when we're here, we're creating this awarenesses, you know, very important for the people also, our European politicians, for example, to think about them before it's too late.
Yeah, yeah. And one more thing, just short to add on what you said. I also had a discussion with Mevrouw Ploemen on this industry. We don't want a linear industry in Africa. We can go to circular industrialization of Africa very, very, very fast. But to get there, we need to have capital for it. And this is a way to get that money in Africa and invest in clean industrialization. So that's very important also to mention.
I want to look to the right. I think there's another question.
Yeah, I'm going to use an example from South America. In South America, when Simón Bolívar arrived and tried to create some, let's say, United States of South America, what happened is that they never care about indigenous people. So we had hundreds of indigenous people there. But eventually, when you look at South America today, basically colonization is almost completely fulfilled, because from the many hundreds of different cultures and languages, we only speak Spanish and Portuguese. So how do you expect to protect your cultural heritage while making this movement of Pan-African state with one government?
Yeah.
How are your unique cultures going to have to disappear, and you are going to communicate with each other in English or in Arabic? Which is the language you have been chosen? You have chosen to do that.
Yeah, that is for the long term. Well, it's a very interesting
nice question.
It's a very, very interesting question. We don't look at the Africans as tribes, and we have a common factor in the African culture. This Ubuntu philosophy, you can find it with pygmies. Pygmies are one kind of people in Central Africa. They live in the forest. They don't come to the cities. But when you go there, you visit them, you find exactly the same philosophy. So we are going to build on the differences. And it's not about speaking English. Swahili is a very easy language to learn. You know, and the language won't be a problem. We are not talking about coming on power and to eliminate all this cultural. This is the wisdom of Africa, all this culture. All we need in Africa is the good leadership. What can you do with what you have? We have different cultures in the Netherlands. Fries people from Friesland, you have people from Brabant. Nobody is telling them you should stop being Fries or you should stop being Limburgs, because it's the wisdom. But we don't have politicians in Africa who thinks in this way. And they are very easy to manipulate. So our plan is to have a transition period. And you can see Africa as, if you take North Africa, now they all speak Arabs. West Africa, we have a language called Malinke, which is very easy to teach. In Central Africa, Lingala. So this is something a government should work on. And it's a challenge, but we should be ready to face this challenge, to address it. But the most important at this moment, because all these tribes, all these people in Africa are facing one same problem, which is extreme poverty. If we solve this problem of poverty in Africa, we can even start thinking about, okay, what is the role of foreign religions in Africa? Before white people came to Africa, we are the first who came with the concept of one God. We have philosophy in Africa. We have ruling systems that are much better than democracy. But we don't have the political power to put it in action. So this is a bit the way I can answer your question, and it's a very, very interesting question.
Can I add something to him? Because I think also the language really is not the problem. The problem is the willing and the loyalty.
Exactly.
You know, like Pan-Africanism, for example, when it started, they already have different languages.
Yeah.
But then they have agree on one goal to achieve it. That was it. I think language is not play that really strong more than you're loyal to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm sorry, I disagree.
So wait. You had your question.
Disagree.
Sorry, I want to bring it to the panel. It's not. We have also time after the program to.
Yeah. It's Evo Morales brought maybe a solution for you.
Yeah.
He created just 70 years ago the plurinational state of Bolivia, changing the constitution from a republic where the Catholic Church had absolute power to a country where the very few cultures that survived now have a saying. Obviously, there is a lot of problems there, but one thing that is very clear to me is that in all those 500 years of colonization, the colonization from the Spanish, the colonization has managed to create a genocide bigger than any other genocide we can remember in history. I would find it horrible if it would happen to you in Africa.
I'm sorry, I wanna respond because I disagree with Max.
Yeah.
I think the question that was posed is a valid one. I hate to break it to you, but we don't live in a utopia that everything is arranged and that everything is protected equally. Language is important. Culture is important. Religion is important. Practices is important. Music, the way how you dance, talk, eat, everything is important. And what we're not going to do over here is play the oppression Olympics, because that's kind of the feeling that I get right now. Yes, it's true that there is extreme poverty and we should tackle extreme poverty, but we cannot say, oh, we're going to tackle this one first and we'll see along the way, and we have maybe an interim period and see what we're going to do to protect X, Y, and Z. People all over the world have civil, political, and cultural rights. They have cultural rights for a reason, right? What we have seen with this enslavement of African people is that they took away everything. They took away your language, your religion, your names, your ceremonies, you name it. To say right now, okay, we're gonna tackle poverty and we put our trust in a single leader who will protect everything in the United States of Africa, people need to wake up. That's not how it works. Why would you put everything on the line and then just hope that someone will protect that? No, it should be protected equally. And sure, it's true, there are languages that you can learn easy, Swahili, it's true. But should we focus on, oh, it's a language that you can learn easily? No, it's not your language. If you want to learn that language, like English is not my native language, but I learned it. It was my choice. But I make the decision which language I want to learn, but my native language needs to be protected.
Yeah. And I think this is an important point, that we don't copy solutions that look European, right? So we have to decolonize our imagination, how unity and diversity, etc., can look like. Max, you want to respond to this response?
Just shortly, the unity I'm talking about, I said it at the beginning. It has nothing to do with culture. It has nothing to do with, how do you call this, history. It has to do with the future. How can Africa play a role in the world? Because at this moment, you can protect any culture you want in Africa, but our voice doesn't mean anything to nobody. So this is my priority. How can we turn Africa in a powerhouse in this world? Because we have a lot to offer to the world. That's the point. So the political unity of Africa is strategic to the survival of African. Like I said, if we don't reach this level, then we will end up with this genocide we are all afraid of. With our beautiful culture, our beautiful languages, we will not survive. So that's my point. We will not survive if we continue like this, divided and not trying to become a power. That's what I wanted to ask.
All right. And we don't, just to make clear, and I like that you also express disagreement. We don't need to agree. We have different perspectives, but I want to leave it there for where we are now, also due to time. Maybe one final question. So there's one final question there, and then I want to add one question. We do one round that you can answer to this last question, and the question that I want to answer to it, what do you think are important reparatory steps as well that we should take from here relating to migration? Yes.
Hi, I'm going to take a little bit more than one question because I was waiting a long time and people were taking their turn, so I'm going to do the same. First, want to quickly say something. I quickly want to say something about the question that was just asked. I feel it's a bit denigrating to see Pan-Africanism as a problem than as a solution, because I do feel that we shouldn't copy anything from Europe. But if you see like how Europe works together, they have different cultures and different languages. And it's never been a problem, so I don't think Pan-Africanism in that sense could be an issue. And then I want to go to something very differently. I think at the end of the presentation of Max, I think, there was this suggestion to do a new way of trading and selling cacao or any other products for a share of the retail price. And I want to ask, like, if we do it that way, how then Africa becomes independent of this still European controlled market?
Yeah. Yeah, that is very easy to answer. We are talking about sharing the revenues. So from that moment, nobody is controlling nobody. We are sharing the revenue. First, we need to understand Africa cannot go to industrialization right now. We don't have the capital for it. We don't have the infrastructure. And it's not an intelligent way to copy this linear industry. So the solution we have is a transitional solution. And from the moment, believe me, when we will impose to China, the United States, Europe, to share the benefit made at the end of the value chain, believe me, they will talk differently. Because then it's in Netherlands, there is they say, je moet iemand pakken zijn portemonnee. When you get there, people change the way they talk. Because we are sharing it. And we cannot decide today, okay, we don't sell any raw material. That is when you will get war. So for the time being, it's a strategy to go like something like 10 years. We continue, but we change the rules. And in that time, we can install in Africa a clean industry which is better for the whole world. Today we are talking about energy transition, what they are doing on sea. While if you just use a piece of the Sahara Desert, you can produce solar energy for the whole world. So it is a bit what it's needed to understand.
But I have a question to you. Do you think African leaders of today, they know what is the African resources value and what is Africa value itself?
They don't know.
That's the problem, I think.
They don't know.
That is the problem.
They don't know.
You know, that's the problem.
Now we are doing a research with the Wageningen University to list all the shareholders and the cacao industry in the Netherlands. I was talking to someone from the Cocoa Board, that is the institution in Ghana who control cocoa. They didn't have any ideas about who is doing what with cacao when it's happened, when it's arrived in Amsterdam. They don't care about that. They send secret services to Europe to follow people like you and me, instead of following their money. So they don't have any idea about that. That's why now I'm happy Mika started talking like, I don't call these people leaders. If we solve this problem, we will become the legitimate leaders of Africa, directly. So it's not only about economy, it's about how we are going to build Africa for the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think you also answered my question, no problem, in terms of what you think is most important to do. So to summarize, it's getting a shareholder of what goes out of Africa as a simple solution, but you can apply it systematically not only to cacao, but other...
To all
raw materials, and that can be reinvested
cleaner
within that context. So thank you for sharing that. Then I want to look to you for the rest. What do you want to say as final words towards the audience, what you think is most important to be done in relation to this subject?
I think that we should all be conscious that, however you want to name it, I don't believe in refugee crisis. Immigration, asylum seekers, whatsoever, is linked to colonialism. There is a reparatory aspect attached to it. You know, like they came, they conquered, they exploited, they divided, they closed the borders, but they take the resources. There's a reason why people are leaving their countries. They're not doing it because they're bored or something. There's a reason behind it. And we all laugh, but they feel it. They truly feel it. Talk to a person who comes from there, and they will share their experience with you. And their stories, their realities are horrible. And at the same time, we need to be conscious how we, over here in the Netherlands, are contributing to it, right? We are all in our own way contributing to it. Use your privilege to empower others. Don't be a savior. We don't need that. We need allies.
Action.
Don't cherry pick who you want to help. Don't cherry pick who you want to advocate for. And having said that, I cannot stand here in front of you, talk about double standards like third country nationals or colonialism without asking you for your sympathy for the people of Palestine. It's not a complex issue. There's nothing complicated about it. It's apartheid, it's colonialism, it's genocide, it's persecution, it's collective punishment, and it's way more than that. I don't know how many of you have seen Nasser's performance at the TV show Khalid and Said. And there was a part where he said, we are used to defining people in numbers. 1,200 people are killed, 48 are wounded. But these are human beings. We cannot cherry pick which colonial aspect we condemn and which one we ignore. We cannot cherry pick who deserves our help and who doesn't. Just imagine that Palestine is Ukraine. Just imagine that. Would you react the same? So I urge you to stand in solidarity and use your privilege wisely, use it in a way to create justice. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe to add a little bit to what you said, and then I'll give you to also the final words, is that the Israeli government actually is connected. Like justice to Palestine is connected to justice to everywhere, because you saw, for instance, when the apartheid regime in South Africa was losing international...
PLO helped him.
Yeah, but also when South African apartheid regime was losing its face towards the international community and starting to get boycotted, Israel was one of the last powers to maintain and give arms support to the apartheid regime.
Yeah.
And Israel drew inspiration from the apartheid regime to build its own. So it's good to see the connections, that the freedom of one people is connected to the freedom of other people as well. So thank you for bringing that in. Khalid.
Okay, what I would like to add here, I would like to say I'm really interested in relation in general, but in this specific topic of today, European-African relationship. You know what? Relationship always, built in just simple things, not really that difficult things. Just few things. For example, the impact of I welcoming you, for example. Here, I would like to mention, I would like to talk here about the African refugees in Europe. First thing, the impact of welcoming. I mean, here in the camp, for example, or when you come, you demand your asylum. Sometimes it's really terrible. It's really terrible. And that impact, it will stay in your mind until you leave this world. It's not about just short of time. And also the courtrooms. The judge should represent the public of his state. And the law, something should be practiced. It's not, but when you go to the refugees court, for example, you will see the difference. And all these things, create really a very deep impact of those whom are vulnerable. They have forced to leave the country and searching safe world somewhere else. And those whom should protect them, they just treat them in a different way. If we're able to do that, I think we will be able to change something. And of course, also we pray for Palestine and Palestinian people, and we wish peace should be established there somehow. But it will not happen before our making the first step. 7 years ago, I mentioned something and I said it was in the, I think, live Facebook event. People say Khalid is get paid by somebody, but it's not. I was saying, how we can reach the activism in Jerusalem, in Israel, because I believe not every Muslim is terrorist, and also not every Israeli is Zionist. There are some people really against the apartheid in Israel. How we can reach these people to talk to them and to able to work with them to create kind of that I don't know what this will be.
Maybe from the river to the sea, that there's equality, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for.
Yes. Thank you for sharing. Francesca?
I have nothing as powerful as these last two remarks. I just wanted to echo that I fully agree with everything that was just said, and maybe echoing Mika's point before about education, because I think especially from a kind of European perspective, that's what we really need. Is the horrors of colonialism are really just not explained or taught in depth as they should be. And I think when we start with that, and education can change the kind of cultural thought of people in Europe, and that's where we should start, at least from our side. So
Thank you for sharing. And with these last words, I want to give a warm applause to our panel, Khalid, Joan, Francesca, and Fairuz. You can take a seat. We're almost there, but we wanted to give the final word also to Linda Nooitmeer, who is the voorzitter van NINSE, the National Institute for Dutch Slavery and Commemoration. We have been talking about education, and I think commemoration is one very important form of education. So thank you, Linda, for being here, and also as NINSE for supporting this event, because we know there's been a lot of focus as well on the Dutch colonies, more in, let's say, the Caribbean region. But you've also decided as NINSE to support this event that had more continental perspective. So give an applause for Linda. And,
thank you.
We maybe want to ask you to close maybe what you took from this event that you're going to bring towards the NINSE, what you have been listening as being here as NINSE, and also to what extent you find there is enough or maybe not enough talk about a continental perspective on this transatlantic slavery and colonial present instead of history. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, I think that there's not enough talked about this. It seems like at NINSE that we focus on the Caribbean part of Holland and Suriname as those places where the Dutch stated the structure of slavery, but it started at the motherland, in the motherland, Africa. And that is something that is not enough emphasized. And a few months ago in September, I saw a clip on YouTube where President Ramaphosa said to President Macron, "Give us back what you stole from us 400 years ago." And I think that that is the essence. And he also said, whatever you think about him, we are not beggars. Yeah. And I think that, and that is why I think, and that is also the reason why NINSE emphasizes on history, knowing the history, emphasizes on the awareness of not only the slave history, but on its effects on daily life. Because if Mr. Ramaphosa is talking about give us back what you took from us 400 years ago, he's referring to slavery. And the whole structure in Africa that is based upon it then and now, and I agree with Farouz, it's not neo-colonialism, it's the same structure. Yeah. We can't forget that. But I was a little bit, what I take back of this, well, I started reading when I was 6. My father was really anxious to let me learn. And he started with giving me books about Africa and magazines. And I remember the first articles that I read about Africa. And I was 6, I'm now 49. And I must say that nothing has changed. So what does it say? I agree with, I don't know which one of the two it was, is that we have to acknowledge that we ourselves are colonized. How can we change? Because how is it possible that even now we still have the same structures? How is it possible that even our governments in Africa don't do what they have to do? So I think education is very important. We have to be honest with each other. I don't believe in utopia. I do believe in unity. But before we can have unity, we must acknowledge where we are coming from and what has that done with our own minds. And because at the end of the day, the word of an African body back then, 400 years ago, is the same right now. That is the reason why people, there is an arrogance when it comes to, I mean, you're talking about fair trade. Yeah. But how is it that when we want to talk about fair trade for African goods, nothing happens? How is it that we have those lending structures? Prime Minister Motley made a comparison that when Greece wants to lend money, and it has the same economic structure as Ghana, the terms are different. The basis is rooted within our world history. The transatlantic slave history is not something from Holland. It's world history. Yeah. So as long as we don't acknowledge that and the effects that it has on us, then I think in 30 years we will still have the same discussion. It's not a very positive note, but it is what it is. And I think it asks for us to take action. And what will I take from this to NINSE? I think that NINSE started with wanting to have more, to have recognition of the ancestors, the power of the ancestors. We wanted the apologies. We wanted to make sure that history was being told. And I believe that we are going to have that we're in the next phase. And that means that the triangle, as it started in the slave time, Africa, the Korean parts of Holland, and Suriname, and Europe, that we have to talk about it more and take action about it more, because Khalid is your name? Yes.
Yeah.
My heart breaks every time, and it was even when the Ukrainian war started, when we saw our allies who also made apologies on the local level, understood why African Ukrainians didn't get the same rights as their own brothers and sisters from Ukraine. They said, well, they look like us, so we understand. And if we don't acknowledge it and take into mind why people leave their country. I fled my country when I was 16 with my parents. It's not because we wanted to leave, but we're talking about unsafe places. But how can we talk about migration in Holland when we accept that the conditions in those countries are not being met at a proper rate? So there is a lot of work for us to do. I don't know if at NINSE we can do it by ourselves, so that's why we believe in allies. Yeah. But the real conversation is not, it's about the black skin. It's not about the borders. It's not about the different countries. People of African descent worldwide, we have a problem. And it's really time to acknowledge this. And I think that if we're talking about after the comma, this should be one of those things. So that is one thing that I take back to Africa, to NINSE.
To NINSE, you bring Africa back to
United
NINSE.
States of Africa.
To NINSE. And I want to thank you, because it's the first time, I think, that we supported this event. And thank you for the opportunity to do this. And we have to do it more. And we're very open to do this.
Thank you. So that's also called to... All right. Then I think there's nothing more to say except for thanking everyone on behalf of Equal Trade Alliance, Arales, but also Pakhuis de Zwijger for hosting and NINSE for supporting. Check the agendas of all the organizations and their website and the petitions that have been mentioned. And maybe because it has been, I know, a lot today, so we have to read and educate ourselves. Maybe 2 books that I can recommend is Time for Reparations, The Time Is Now, by Nora Whitman, which is a Pan-African perspective on reparations. Really thick book, but I can really recommend it. And the other one is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. So I give you the homework, hopefully, and take your benefit of it. Yes. Thank you all for being here.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.